The morning sunlight filtered through my kitchen window as I stood at the counter, mechanically stirring my coffee while staring at my phone screen. The text message from my 34-year-old daughter still glowed there, each word cutting deeper every time I read it. "I wish you had never been born, Mom. You ruined my childhood, and I can't pretend anymore that we're okay." My hands trembled as I set down the mug, the ceramic clinking against the granite countertop in the silence of my empty house. 48 hours had passed since those words arrived, and I still couldn't comprehend how we'd reached this point. Emma had always been strong-willed, but this felt like it came from somewhere darker, somewhere I couldn't reach. This story will shock you, so make sure to like and subscribe for more. Drop a comment with your city name. My name is Margaret Gray. I'm 62 years old, and I thought I knew my daughter. For 3 decades, I'd poured everything into raising Emma Patricia Chen, the beautiful girl I adopted when she was 4 years old. She'd been my world, my purpose, especially after her father walked out when she was 12. Now, sitting in the kitchen where we'd shared countless breakfast conversations and homework sessions, I felt like a stranger in my own life. The familiar creak of the front door interrupted my spiral of thoughts. My older brother, David Gray's voice echoed through the hallway, warm and concerned as always. At 65, David had been my anchor through every crisis, from our parents' deaths to my divorce. His steady presence had helped me navigate single motherhood, and now he was here again, probably sensing something was wrong through that mysterious sibling intuition we'd always shared. "Margaret, you look terrible," he said gently as he entered the kitchen, his weathered face creased with worry. "You haven't been answering my calls." I showed him the message, watching his expression shift from confusion to shock. David had been Uncle Dave to Emma her entire life, taking her fishing, attending every school play, walking her down the aisle at her wedding just 2 years ago. This attack felt personal to him too. "There has to be more to this," he said finally, setting the phone down carefully. "Emma doesn't speak like this. Something's happened." That afternoon, I found myself sitting across from Linda Martinez at our favorite coffee shop downtown, the same corner booth where we'd been meeting for 15 years. Linda worked as a family counselor at the community center, and she'd watched Emma grow up through countless stories and occasional family barbecues. Her professional insight had always been invaluable, but today, I needed her as a friend more than anything else. "I keep replaying every moment," I told her, my voice barely above a whisper. "Every decision, every mistake. Was I too strict? Not strict enough? Did I miss something important when she was growing up?" Linda's dark eyes reflected genuine compassion as she reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "Margaret, I've known you and Emma for years. You were a devoted mother who sacrificed everything for that girl. This outburst doesn't match the relationship I've observed." "But what if she's right?" The question escaped before I could stop it. What if I did ruin her childhood somehow? What if adopting her was selfish, and I never gave her what she really needed? The weight of those possibilities pressed down on me like a physical force. I thought about Emma's teenage years, the arguments about curfew and grades, the way she'd sometimes look at me with such frustration when I couldn't understand her homework or forgot to pack the right lunch. Had those small failures accumulated into something unforgivable? That evening, David and I sat in my living room surrounded by photo albums I'd pulled from storage. Pictures of Emma's first day of school, her sweet 16 party, graduation from college, scattered across the coffee table like evidence in a trial where I was both defendant and jury. Each image told a story of love and dedication, but now they felt like lies. "Look at her face in these pictures," David insisted, pointing to a photo from Emma's high school graduation. "That's genuine happiness, Margaret. That's a girl who felt loved and supported." I wanted to believe him, but the cruel words on my phone screen seemed to override decades of memories. How could I trust my own recollections when Emma herself was telling me they were wrong? The house felt different now, haunted by questions I couldn't answer. Every room held reminders of the life I'd built around being Emma's mother. The refrigerator still displayed her college diploma copy. Her wedding photo sat prominently on the mantel, and her childhood bedroom remained largely unchanged, a shrine to the relationship I thought we'd had. Sleep eluded me that night as I lay in bed analyzing every interaction we'd had in recent months. Emma had seemed distant at family gatherings, checking her phone frequently and leaving early with vague excuses about work or plans with friends. I'd attributed it to the normal busyness of adult life, but now those moments took on sinister significance. By the third day, I'd reached a decision that both terrified and determined me. I needed to understand what had triggered this explosion of resentment. If I truly had ruined her childhood, I owed it to both of us to face that truth. But if something else was happening, if someone or something had poisoned her memories of our life together, I wasn't going to let it destroy us without a fight. Linda had agreed to help me navigate a conversation with Emma, while David promised to be there for emotional support. We were going to get to the bottom of this, even if it meant hearing painful truths about my failures as a mother. One small detail blew the whole thing open. The morning of our planned confrontation arrived gray and drizzly, matching my mood perfectly. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the untouched cup of coffee growing cold in my hands. The familiar ritual of my morning routine felt hollow now. Each mundane action weighted with the knowledge that everything I thought I knew about my relationship with Emma might be a lie. Linda arrived at 9 sharp, her usually pristine appearance slightly disheveled. Dark circles under her eyes suggested she'd lost as much sleep over this as I had. She set her purse down with more force than necessary and immediately began bustling around my kitchen, a sure sign she was nervous. "I've been thinking about this all night," she announced, pulling mugs from my cabinet without asking. "Something doesn't add up, Margaret. Emma's always talked about you with such respect and gratitude. Just last Christmas, she was telling me how lucky she felt to have had you as a single mother. How hard it must have been, but how you never made her feel like a burden." The words should have been comforting, but they only deepened my confusion. Maybe she was just being polite, I said, though even as the words left my mouth, they felt wrong. Emma had never been one for empty social niceties, especially not with Linda, whom she'd known since childhood. David knocked on the back door and let himself in, carrying a small notebook that immediately caught my attention. His expression was serious but determined, the same look he'd worn during particularly challenging cases back when he still practiced law. "I did some thinking of my own," he said without preamble, settling into the chair across from me. "Margaret, I know we agreed to approach Emma directly, but I think we need to consider that something else might be influencing this situation." Linda paused in her coffee making, turning to face us both. "What do you mean?" David opened his notebook, revealing pages of his careful handwriting. "I've been documenting Emma's behavior patterns over the past few months, based on what Margaret's told me and what I've observed myself. The distance at family gatherings, the shortened visits, the way she seems distracted or uncomfortable. But here's what's interesting. It all seems to have started around the time she began seeing that new boyfriend of hers." My stomach clenched. Emma had mentioned someone new in her life, but had been unusually secretive about details. Normally, she was eager to share stories about people she was dating, seeking my opinion and including me in that part of her world. This time had been different. "You think he's turning her against me?" The question came out smaller than I intended, tinged with the kind of desperate hope that makes you feel pathetic even as you cling to it. "I think," David said carefully, "that sometimes people in new relationships can be influenced to reinterpret their past experiences through someone else's lens, especially if that someone has their own agenda or unresolved issues with parental figures." Linda set down 3 steaming mugs with a decisive clink. That would explain why her accusations were so vague and emotional rather than specific. If someone was feeding her ideas about how you should have raised her differently, she might be feeling confused and angry without really understanding why. I wanted to embrace this theory, to let it wash away the crushing guilt I'd been carrying for days. But a part of me resisted, afraid of making excuses instead of facing hard truths. But what if I really did fail her in ways I can't see? What if he's just helping her recognize legitimate grievances? "Then we'll deal with that," David said firmly. "But Margaret, I've watched you parent that girl for over 20 years. I've seen you sacrifice sleep to help her with school projects, work extra shifts to pay for her activities, celebrate every achievement like it was your own. I've also seen her response to all of that love and support. Whatever's happening now doesn't erase that history." The 3 of us sat in contemplative silence, sipping our coffee while rain drummed against the kitchen windows. The familiar comfort of having my closest friends rally around me felt like the first solid ground I'd stood on since receiving Emma's devastating text. "So, what do we do?" I finally asked. Linda leaned forward, her expression shifting into the focused determination I remembered from our younger days when we'd tackle problems head on. "We stick to the original plan, but we approach it differently. Instead of going in defensive or apologetic, we go in curious. We ask Emma to help us understand specifically what she's feeling and why. We listen without judgment, but we also don't accept vague accusations." David nodded, making notes. "And if it becomes clear that outside influence is a factor, we address that directly but carefully. The last thing we want is to make Emma feel like she has to choose between you and someone she cares about." The plan felt more solid now, more strategic than the emotional ambush I'd been dreading. But as I looked at my 2 dearest friends, both willing to invest their time and energy into helping me navigate this crisis, a new fear crept in. What if she refuses to talk to me at all? What if she's made up her mind that I'm the villain in her story, and nothing I say will change that? Before either of them could answer, my phone buzzed on the table. All 3 of us stared at it, the sound unnaturally loud in the quiet kitchen. Emma's name appeared on the screen, but this time it wasn't a text message. It was a phone call. My hand trembled as I reached for the device, aware that David and Linda were holding their breath alongside me. Whatever Emma had to say next would either begin the process of healing between us or cement the destruction of everything I'd built my life around. But when I answered and heard Emma's voice, strained and tearful in a way that had nothing to do with anger, I realized that everything we'd theorized and planned for was about to become irrelevant. "Mom," she said, the word breaking like a sob. "I need your help. Something terrible has happened, and I don't know what to do." My heart stopped for a moment before racing into overdrive. The Emma I'd expected to confront me with more accusations was gone, replaced by the vulnerable daughter who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. Every maternal instinct that had been twisted into knots by confusion and hurt suddenly snapped into sharp, protective focus. "Emma, sweetheart, what's wrong?" I stood up so quickly that my chair scraped against the kitchen floor. David and Linda's faces immediately shifted from curiosity to concern as they watched me pace to the window, phone pressed against my ear. Through Emma's ragged breathing, I could hear traffic in the background, the distant hum of what sounded like a busy street. She wasn't at her apartment then, wherever that was now. The realization that I didn't even know where my daughter lived hit me like a physical blow, but I pushed the thought aside. Location didn't matter right now. Emma needed me. "I made such a huge mistake, Mom." Her voice was thick with tears, each word punctuated by shaky breaths. "I trusted someone I shouldn't have, and now everything is falling apart. I don't have anywhere else to turn." I caught David's eye as he quietly moved his chair back from the table, giving me space to move around the kitchen while I talked. Linda had risen too, hovering near the counter with her arms crossed, her expression tight with the same protective energy I'd seen her display whenever one of our children had been in trouble during their school years. "Tell me what happened," I said, forcing my voice to remain calm and steady, despite the way my pulse hammered against my throat. "Whatever it is, we'll figure it out together." The silence that followed was filled only with Emma's attempts to control her crying. I found myself holding my breath, remembering all the times she'd called me in college with various crises, from failed exams to roommate drama to her first real heartbreak. But this felt different. The desperation in her voice carried a weight that made those earlier problems seem insignificant. "I can't explain it over the phone," she finally managed. "It's too complicated, and I'm scared someone might be listening. Can I come home?" "I know I don't deserve it after what I said to you, but I don't know where else to go." The irony wasn't lost on me that 24 hours ago, I would have given anything to hear Emma ask to come home. Now that she was asking, the circumstances felt weighted with dread. Still, the answer came without hesitation. "Of course you can come home. You don't even need to ask." I glanced at the clock on the microwave, calculating drive times from various parts of the city. "How far away are you?" "About an hour, maybe less if traffic clears up." Emma's voice was steadier now, as if having a concrete plan was helping her regain some control. "Mom, I need to warn you about something. The things I said to you yesterday, some of them weren't entirely my own thoughts. Someone has been filling my head with ideas about you, about our family, and I was too stupid to see what was happening." My free hand gripped the edge of the kitchen counter, as this confirmation of what Linda and David had suspected sent both relief and anger coursing through me. Relief that my instincts about our relationship hadn't been completely wrong. Anger at whoever had manipulated my daughter's emotions and memories for their own purposes. "We'll sort all of that out when you get here," I said. "Right now, I just need you to be safe. Are you driving?" "Yes, but I'm pulled over at a rest stop." I was too upset to drive safely for a while. The admission made my chest tighten with worry, imagining Emma alone and crying in some roadside parking lot. "I'll be careful, I promise." After we hung up, I stood staring at my phone for a long moment, trying to process the complete reversal of everything I'd been preparing for. Behind me, I could hear David and Linda moving around the kitchen, their voices low as they discussed this new development. "Well," Linda said, appearing beside me with a fresh cup of coffee that I hadn't asked for but desperately needed. "That changes things significantly?" David had moved to the living room window that faced the street, unconsciously taking up a position where he could watch for Emma's arrival. "Whatever's happened, it sounds serious enough that she's willing to admit she was wrong about you." That takes courage, especially for someone Emma's age. I sank back into my chair, cradling the warm mug between my hands as I tried to prepare myself for whatever Emma would tell us when she arrived. The shift from defending myself against accusations to providing support for whatever crisis she was facing felt disorienting, like trying to change direction while running at full speed. I keep thinking about what she said, about someone filling her head with ideas about me. I looked up at my two friends, both of whom had settled back at the table with expressions of grim determination. What kind of person does that? What could they possibly gain from turning a daughter against her mother? Linda's jaw tightened in a way that reminded me why I'd always been grateful to have her in my corner during difficult times. Someone who wanted to isolate her, most likely, cut her off from her support system so they could have more control over her decisions. The implications of that statement settled over the kitchen like a cold draft. I thought about Emma's life over the past few months, trying to remember details from our conversations that might have seemed insignificant at the time, but could now provide clues about what she'd been dealing with. The problem was, we talked so infrequently that I had very little information to work with. David returned to the table, bringing with him the restless energy of someone preparing for a potential confrontation. The question is, what kind of trouble has this manipulation landed her in? People don't usually reveal their influence tactics unless something has gone very wrong with their plan. As if in response to his words, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from Emma. I think I'm being followed. Should I go to the police or just come straight home? The kitchen fell silent as David and Linda read the message over my shoulder, and I realized that whatever we'd been preparing for had just become infinitely more complicated and dangerous. My hands shook as I typed back, "Come straight here. David and Linda are with me. Drive carefully and call me if anything feels wrong." "We need to call the police," David said immediately, his protective instincts kicking in. "Wait," I said, though every maternal fiber in my being wanted to agree with him. "Let's find out what we're dealing with first. If she's being followed, having police cars at the house might make things worse." Linda was already moving toward the front window. "I'll keep watch. David, can you check the backyard? Make sure there's nowhere for someone to hide if they follow her here." As David headed toward the back door, I realized something had fundamentally shifted in the last 10 minutes. The woman who had been sitting in this kitchen earlier, devastated by her daughter's accusations, was gone. In her place sat a mother whose child was in danger, and nothing else mattered. "There," Linda called softly from the window. "Blue sedan, driving slowly. Is that Emma?" I joined her at the window and felt my heart jump as I recognized Emma's car. But my relief was short-lived as I noticed how she kept checking her mirrors and how she drove past our house once before circling back to park. "She's scared," I whispered, watching as Emma sat in her car for a long moment, clearly scanning the street before getting out. When Emma finally walked up the driveway, I could see the tension in every line of her body. Gone was the angry, confident young woman who had stormed out of my life months ago. This was someone who looked genuinely frightened, and despite everything that had happened between us, my first instinct was to protect her. I opened the door before she could knock, and for a heartbeat, we just looked at each other. Her eyes were red from crying, her hair disheveled, and she clutched her phone like a lifeline. "Mom," she said, and her voice broke on the word. I pulled her inside and wrapped my arms around her, feeling her tremble against me. "You're safe now. We're going to figure this out." David returned from checking the backyard just as Linda was securing the front door. "All clear outside," he reported, then stopped when he saw Emma. His expression softened immediately. "Hey, kiddo. Rough day?" Emma pulled back from me, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm sorry about everything I said, everything I believed. I was so stupid." "You weren't stupid," I said firmly, guiding her to the couch. "Someone deliberately misled you. That's not your fault." Linda brought Emma a glass of water and settled into the chair across from us. "Emma, can you tell us what's been happening? Who do you think was following you?" Emma's hands shook as she took a sip of water. "It started about 6 months ago. I met someone online, in a support group for people with difficult family relationships. He seemed so understanding, so wise. He kept telling me that my problems with you, Mom, were worse than I realized. That you were manipulating me without me even knowing it." My stomach dropped, but I kept my expression neutral. This wasn't the time for "I told you so's." He convinced me that the only way to be truly free was to cut all ties with toxic family members. He said that people like you would never change, and that I needed to protect myself by walking away completely. David leaned forward from where he stood near the window. "What changed? What made you realize he was lying?" Emma's face crumpled. "He started asking for money, small amounts at first, for the support group, he said. Then larger amounts. He said he was in trouble and needed help, and that since I was like family to him now, he hoped he could count on me." The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. "How much did you give him?" I asked gently. "Everything," Emma whispered. "My savings, my emergency fund. I even took out a credit card and maxed it out. When I couldn't give him any more, he got angry. He said I was selfish, just like you had raised me to be. That's when I started to see that everything he'd told me about you, he was now saying about me." Linda's jaw was tight with controlled anger. "And now he's following you?" "I think so. After I told him I wouldn't give him any more money, he started showing up places. At my work, at the coffee shop I go to. Always watching, never approaching directly. Today, I saw the same car behind me for 20 minutes, and I just panicked. I took Emma's hands in mine, feeling the weight of months of separation and misunderstanding. "We're going to handle this together. All of us. But first, I need you to know something important." Emma looked at me with eyes that suddenly seemed much younger than her 24 years. "You will always be welcome in this house, no matter what happens between us. No matter what mistakes either of us makes. That's what family means." Just then, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Tell Emma she can't hide from her responsibilities forever." I showed the text to the others, watching Emma's face drain of color. David moved away from the window and checked the locks on the front door, his protective instincts kicking in despite Emma being his sister rather than his daughter. "That's him," Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He always talks like that, like I owe him something." Linda took the phone from my hands and studied the message. "This is harassment. We need to document everything." She looked at Emma with the practical concern that had made her such a good friend over the years. "Do you have any of his other messages saved?" Emma nodded reluctantly. "On my laptop, back at my apartment, screenshots of our conversations, emails, everything. I kept them because part of me couldn't believe it was really happening." "We'll get them tomorrow," I said firmly. "Tonight, you're staying here." "Mom, I can't just move back in because some creep is bothering me. We still have our own problems to work through." David sat down on the arm of Linda's chair, something he'd done since he was a teenager when he wanted to be part of a serious conversation, but wasn't sure he belonged. Maybe this isn't about moving back in permanently. Maybe it's just about being safe while we figure things out. I felt a surge of pride at his maturity, even as my heart ached for what Emma had been through. Your brother's right. And Emma, what happened to you? That manipulation you experienced? It helps me understand why you pulled away so completely. I always wondered why it felt so sudden, so absolute. Emma set down her water glass and finally looked directly at me. He made everything you did sound sinister. Remember when you'd call to check on me after I moved out? He said that was you trying to control my independence. When you'd suggest we have dinner together, he said you were guilting me into maintaining an unhealthy relationship. I remember those conversations, I said carefully. You'd get so defensive, and I couldn't understand why simple invitations felt like attacks to you. Because by the time we'd talk, I'd already spent hours hearing about how manipulative parents use guilt and obligation to maintain control over their adult children. Everything felt like a trap, even when part of me wanted to say yes. Linda refilled Emma's water glass, her movements gentle but purposeful. Predators are experts at isolating people from their support systems. They make you doubt your own judgment about the people who actually care about you. My phone buzzed again. This time the message read, I know where you live now, too. The room went completely silent. David stood up and walked to the front window, pulling the curtain back just enough to peer outside. There's a car across the street that wasn't there when Emma arrived. Dark sedan, can't see the plates from here. Emma started to shake again. I led him here. I put all of you in danger. No, I said firmly. He put us in danger. You came to the right place. I looked around at my family and my dearest friend. All of us pulled into this situation through no fault of our own, yet all of us ready to face it together. The question is, what do we do now? David let the curtain fall back. The car just drove away, but I got a partial plate number. Emma buried her face in her hands. This is never going to end, is it? I watched my daughter's shoulders slump in defeat and felt something fierce ignite in my chest. Emma, look at me. When she finally raised her head, I saw the scared young woman she still was underneath all her adult independence. Yes, this will end. But it might get harder before it gets easier, and we need to be smart about this. David moved away from the window and sat on the coffee table facing Emma, his knees almost touching hers. Tell us everything you know about this guy? His full name? Where he works? What kind of car he drives? Anything that might help us figure out our next move. Emma took a shaky breath. His name is Marcus Webb. He's 38, works in marketing for some tech company downtown. He drives a black Honda Accord, which is probably what you just saw outside. He told me he owns his condo, likes to talk about his investment portfolio. She paused, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. He seemed so normal at first. Successful, articulate, interested in my opinions. That's how they operate, Linda said, settling back in her chair with the kind of calm authority that had gotten me through every crisis in the past 20 years. They present their best selves until they have you emotionally invested. Then the control starts gradually, so gradually you don't notice until you're already questioning your own judgment about everything. I found myself studying Emma's face, really looking at her for the first time since she'd arrived. Dark circles under her eyes, a tightness around her mouth that hadn't been there before, a wariness that made my heart ache. How long were you together? 8 months. The first 4 were incredible. He was attentive, thoughtful, always planning these elaborate dates. He'd send flowers to my office, remember little things I mentioned in passing. Emma's voice grew quieter. Then he started asking why I needed to spend so much time with my coworkers after work. Why I couldn't just come straight to his place. It seemed reasonable, like he just wanted more time together. David's jaw tightened. But it wasn't really about spending time together, was it? No. Once I started going there directly after work, he'd have dinner ready and want to hear about my entire day. Every conversation, every interaction, who said what to whom. He framed it as being interested in my life. But if I left anything out, if someone mentioned something he hadn't heard about, he'd get this hurt look. He'd say he thought we told each other everything. I recognized the pattern Linda had described, the gradual erosion of boundaries disguised as devotion. When did you start pulling away from us? Emma stared at her hands, twisting her fingers together in a gesture I remembered from her childhood when she was working up the courage to admit she'd broken something. About 3 months ago. He started asking about our conversations too. But with you, Mom, he'd focus on the history. He'd ask if you'd ever made me feel bad for making my own choices, if you'd ever used your disappointment to change my mind about something. The accuracy of his manipulation was breathtaking. Every parent had moments of expressing disappointment, of hoping their adult children might reconsider certain decisions. In the right light, cast by someone with malicious intent, those normal interactions could look like manipulation. And I had to think about it honestly, Emma continued, her voice growing stronger. There were times you expressed concern about my job changes, or when I dated that guy who was obviously using me for money. But when I really examined those conversations, you always ended them by saying it was my choice and you'd support whatever I decided. But he convinced you those were manipulation tactics, Linda said. He was so subtle about it. He'd say things like, "It's interesting how some parents think expressing disappointment isn't a form of emotional pressure," or, "I'm glad my parents trusted me enough to let me make my own mistakes without commentary." He never directly told me you were manipulative. He just created a framework where your normal parental concern looked sinister. My phone buzzed again. This time, the message was longer. "Emma's car is in your driveway. I just want to talk to her. This doesn't have to involve anyone else." I showed the screen to the others. David immediately stood and checked the front window again, then moved to the kitchen window to get a view of the backyard. "I don't see the car, but that doesn't mean he's not nearby." Emma's face had gone pale again. "He knows my car." "Of course he knows my car." She turned to me with an expression of raw panic. "Mom, what if he tries to damage it? What if he follows me when I leave here?" The question hung in the air, highlighting the impossible situation we were in. Emma couldn't stay here indefinitely, but she also couldn't safely return to her normal routine with Marcus escalating his behavior. "We need to think this through systematically," Linda said, her voice cutting through the rising anxiety in the room. "Emma, do you have somewhere else you could stay for a few days? Somewhere he doesn't know about?" "My lease isn't up for 2 months. All my stuff is there. My job doesn't know anything about this." Emma's voice started to rise. "I can't just disappear from my own life because some guy can't accept that I broke up with him." "You're right," I said. "You shouldn't have to disappear. But we need to be strategic about how you reclaim your normal routine." David returned from his window patrol and sat back down. "Has he ever been to your apartment?" "A few times, but not recently. The last month we were together, I was always at his place. He said it was more comfortable, had better amenities." Emma paused. "Looking back, I think he didn't want me in my own space where I felt more independent." My phone buzzed again. I saw the curtain move. I know you're all in there. Emma, please just come outside so we can talk privately. This is between us. This time, I didn't show the message to the others immediately. Instead, I found myself looking around at my family, at Linda, who had become family over the years, all of us drawn together by Emma's crisis, but also by something deeper. For the first time in 2 years, we were all in the same room, working toward the same goal. But Marcus was still out there, and his messages were becoming more demanding. The next decision we made would determine whether this situation escalated further or whether we could find a way to end it safely. Emma seemed to sense my hesitation. What did he say this time? When I showed her the message, her face crumpled. He's not going to stop, is he? He's going to keep pushing until something terrible happens. I could see the fear in Emma's eyes as she stared at my phone, and something shifted inside me. For months after our fight, I had replayed every harsh word she'd thrown at me, wondering if I really had failed her as a mother. But watching her now, seeing her vulnerability and how she'd come to me despite everything that had happened between us, I realized that our relationship was stronger than either of us had understood. Emma, look at me, I said, setting the phone aside. He's going to stop because we're going to make him stop. Together. David moved away from the window and sat down across from us. Your mother's right. This isn't just your problem anymore. It's our problem. I saw Emma's eyes fill with tears at David's words. Despite all the tension that had existed between them over the years, despite the arguments about college and career choices, and the way she'd felt caught between us during the divorce, he was here. We were all here. I keep thinking about what I could have done differently, Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. Maybe if I hadn't been so direct when I broke up with him. Maybe if I'd been gentler. Stop, Linda said firmly. I've seen this pattern too many times. You were clear, you were honest, and you ended a relationship that wasn't working for you. That's exactly what you should have done. But look what it led to. Emma gestured toward the window. What it led to, I said, is him showing you who he really is. And it led to you being smart enough to recognize that you needed help and brave enough to ask for it. David's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then looked up with a frown. It's from a number I don't recognize. He read silently, then his expression darkened. Emma, does Marcus know my name? I might have mentioned you. Why? David showed us the message. David, you need to convince your daughter to talk to me. This has gone on long enough. The room fell silent. Linda was the first to speak. He's researching your family, looking up information about you. How did he get Dad's number? Emma's voice was shaking. Phone records, social media, public records. It's not that hard if you're determined enough, David said grimly. I felt a chill run through me. This wasn't just about Emma anymore. Marcus was pulling all of us into his orbit, trying to use our family connections against us. I should just go talk to him, Emma said suddenly. End this before he drags everyone else into it. Absolutely not, David and I said simultaneously. For a moment, we looked at each other with something approaching surprise. It had been a long time since we'd been united on anything regarding Emma. Emma, that's exactly what he wants, Linda said. He's contacting your father because he wants to pressure you into giving him what he demands. If you go out there now, you're teaching him that harassing your family works. My phone buzzed again, then Linda's phone. We looked at each other with growing alarm. He doesn't have Linda's number, I said. How could he possibly? Linda checked her phone. It's him. He's asking me to talk sense into Emma as her mother's friend? She looked up at us. He's been watching us for longer than we realized. He knows who we are, knows our relationships to each other. The weight of that realization settled over all of us. This wasn't a simple case of an ex-boyfriend who couldn't take no for an answer. This was someone who had been systematically gathering information about Emma's support system. Emma stood up abruptly and started pacing. This is insane. I dated him for 4 months. 4 months! And now he's researching my family, following me, contacting all of you. She stopped and turned to face us. What kind of person does that? Someone who saw you as a possession rather than a person, David said quietly. Someone who thinks he has a right to control you. I watched Emma's face as she processed this, and I could see her working through months of interactions with Marcus, probably reframing things she'd dismissed as quirky or romantic at the time. He always wanted to know where I was going, who I was seeing, she said slowly. But he made it sound like he was just interested in my life, like he cared. And when I started pulling away, he kept saying he was worried about me, that I seemed different, stressed. Classic manipulation, Linda said. Making his controlling behavior seem like concern for your well-being. David's phone buzzed again. This time, when he read the message, his jaw tightened visibly. He's not asking anymore. He's telling me to send Emma outside, or he's going to assume we're holding her against her will. He's threatening to call the police? I asked. That's the implication. Emma sank back into her chair. He's going to keep escalating until one of us breaks. And the longer this goes on, the more he's going to involve all of you in his harassment. I could see her starting to spiral again, starting to blame herself for bringing this chaos into our lives. But something Linda had said earlier was sticking with me. We needed to be strategic. What if we flipped this around? I said slowly. Instead of reacting to what he's doing, what if we took control of the situation? What do you mean? Emma asked. I looked around at my family, at Linda, all of us gathered in my living room dealing with this crisis together. 2 years ago, Emma had accused me of ruining her childhood, of being a selfish mother who put my own needs first. Maybe she'd been right about some of that. But right now, watching her trust me enough to come here for help, seeing David and Linda rally around her without question, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt like a mother who could protect her daughter. I mean, we stopped letting Marcus dictate how this plays out, I said. We document everything he's doing. We make it clear to him that his behavior has consequences, and we show him that Emma isn't isolated and vulnerable. David nodded slowly. You're talking about confronting him directly. I'm talking about showing him that he's not dealing with just Emma anymore. He's dealing with all of us. Emma looked between us, and I could see hope warring with fear in her expression. But what if that makes him more angry? What if he retaliates? Before anyone could answer, all 4 of our phones buzzed simultaneously. The synchronized buzzing of our phones cut through the room like a knife. We all reached for our devices at once, and I watched as 3 faces around me went pale in unison. My screen showed a text from an unknown number. Tell Emma that hiding won't work forever. I know she's in there with her pathetic family. Some mother you turned out to be, raising a daughter who can't even handle a relationship. David's phone showed something similar but more threatening. Your sister is making a mistake that's going to cost all of you. This isn't over. Linda got a message too, which meant Marcus had somehow gotten all our numbers. Stop enabling Emma's childish behavior. She needs to face reality and talk to me like an adult. But it was Emma's message that made my blood run cold. She read it aloud with a shaking voice. I'm parked outside. You have 10 minutes to come out and talk to me, or I start making this everyone's problem. Your neighbors, your family, everyone will know what kind of person you really are. The living room fell deadly quiet. Through the front window blinds, I could see the outline of a dark sedan parked directly across from my driveway. My neighborhood, which had always felt like a safe haven, suddenly felt exposed and vulnerable. He's actually here, Emma whispered, shrinking deeper into the couch cushions. He followed me somehow, or he's been watching your house, or... She was spiraling, her breathing becoming rapid and shallow. David moved to the window, careful not to disturb the blinds. Silver Honda, tinted windows. Can't see inside clearly, but there's definitely someone in the driver's seat. My mind was racing. 2 hours ago, Emma had walked into my kitchen looking defeated and exhausted. Now we had a potentially dangerous man sitting outside my home, demanding she come out to face him. The transformation from a family conversation about relationship problems to this felt surreal and terrifying. This is escalation, Linda said quietly, her counselor training evident in how she was analyzing the situation. He's moved from digital harassment to physical presence. That's a significant boundary he's crossed. I looked at my daughter, curled up on my couch, looking younger than she had in years. The strong, independent woman who had built a successful career and lived on her own was gone, replaced by someone who looked genuinely scared. It reminded me of when she was little and would run to me during thunderstorms, trusting that I could keep her safe from anything. But I wasn't sure I could keep her safe from this. What do we do? I asked, hating how helpless I sounded. Do we call the police? Do we ignore him and hope he goes away? If we call the police right now, what do we tell them? David asked. That a guy is parked on a public street? That he sent some nasty text messages? Unless he's actually broken a law. Emma's phone buzzed again. This time, she couldn't bring herself to read it aloud. She just held it out so we could see the screen. 8 minutes left, Emma. Stop being a coward. Your family can't protect you from having to be an adult. The word coward hit me like a physical blow. Not because Marcus had said it, but because I could see it landing on Emma like he intended. Her shoulders sagged further, and I recognized the expression on her face. It was the same look she'd had 2 years ago when she'd told me I'd ruined her childhood. The look of someone who believed the worst things people said about her. You are not a coward, I said firmly, moving to sit beside her on the couch. Running from someone who's trying to control and intimidate you isn't cowardice, it's survival instinct. But even as I said it, I could see her withdrawing. The old Emma, the one who had been so angry with me, had at least been fighting. This Emma looked like she was ready to surrender just to make it stop. Linda leaned forward in her chair. Emma, what do you want to do? Not what you think you should do, not what would be easiest for everyone else. What do you actually want? Emma stared at her phone screen, where Marcus's cruel words glowed back at her. I want him to leave me alone. I want to feel safe in my own life again. I want to stop feeling like I'm constantly walking on eggshells, trying to avoid setting him off. Then we make that happen? I said, surprised by the certainty in my own voice. We don't let him dictate the terms of this anymore. David looked back from his position by the window. His car door just opened. My heart started pounding as I watched Emma freeze on the couch. The color drained from her face as she processed David's words about Marcus getting out of his car. What's he doing? Emma whispered, her voice barely audible. David adjusted his position by the window, trying to get a better view without being obvious. He's just standing by his car, looking at the house. The silence in my living room felt suffocating. Emma's breathing had become shallow and quick, and I could see her hands trembling as she gripped her phone. This wasn't just fear anymore. It was approaching panic. "Emma, look at me," I said, turning to face her fully on the couch. "Remember when you were 8 and that neighborhood kid Jake kept bothering you at the bus stop? You came home crying every day for a week." "Mom, this isn't the same thing," Emma said, but her eyes met mine anyway. "No, it's not," I agreed. "But do you remember what you did about Jake? You didn't hide in the house forever. You stood up to him. You told him to leave you alone, and when he didn't listen, you got help." Linda nodded from her chair. "Your mom's right. You found your voice then, and you can find it now." "But I was a kid then," Emma protested. "Kids don't understand real consequences. Adults know how much someone can actually hurt you." Her words hit me hard because I could hear the weight of experience in them. When had my daughter learned to be this afraid? When had the world taught her that standing up for herself was more dangerous than staying silent? "He's walking toward the front door," David announced quietly. Emma shot up from the couch like she'd been electrified. "I can't do this. I can't face him. What if he gets angry? What if he does something?" "Then we'll handle it together," I said, standing up as well. "You're not alone in this, Emma. You don't have to face him by yourself." "But what if I say the wrong thing? What if I make it worse?" The doorbell rang, followed immediately by heavy knocking. Emma actually jumped backward, bumping into the coffee table. "Emma, you have choices here," Linda said calmly, even as the knocking continued. "You can let him keep controlling how you feel and what you do, or you can take back some of that control." "How?" Emma asked desperately. "How do I take back control from someone who won't listen to reason?" The knocking stopped for a moment, then started again, more insistent this time. "By deciding what you're willing to tolerate," I said, moving closer to her. "By setting boundaries and sticking to them, even when it's scary." Emma looked at the front door, then back at me. "I don't know how to do that anymore. With Marcus, I always ended up giving in just to avoid conflict. It was easier than fighting." "Easier in the moment," David said from his position by the window. "But look where it got you." Another round of knocking, followed by Marcus's voice calling through the door. "Emma, I know you're in there. Your car's in the driveway. Just give me 5 minutes to explain." Emma flinched at the sound of his voice. "He sounds so reasonable when he talks like that. That's how he always gets me to listen." "But you know what comes after the reasonable voice," Linda said gently. "You know how quickly it can change." I watched my daughter struggle with herself, torn between the person she'd learned to be in her relationship with Marcus and the person she used to be before him. The person who had been strong enough to tell me exactly what she thought of me 2 years ago, even when it hurt. "Emma," I said quietly, "remember what you told me about ruining your childhood? You said I never let you speak for yourself, that I always tried to handle everything for you." She looked at me with confusion. "Mom, why are you bringing that up now?" "Because this is your chance to speak for yourself. Really speak for yourself. Not to please him, not to avoid conflict, but to say what you actually mean." The knocking had stopped, but we could hear Marcus's voice again, closer to the door now. "Emma, don't let them turn you against me. You know we can work this out." Emma's phone buzzed with another text. She looked at it, and her expression hardened slightly. He's telling me I'm being manipulated by my family. That I'm too weak to think for myself. What do you think? I asked. Emma stared at the phone for a long moment. When she looked up, there was something different in her eyes. Not the confidence I wanted to see, not yet, but something that looked like the beginning of anger. I think, she said slowly, I'm tired of being called weak by someone who can't handle the word no. The front door handle rattled as Marcus tried it, even though it was clearly locked. The sound of the door handle rattling sent a chill through the room. Emma's grip tightened on her phone, and I could see her fighting between the old instinct to give in and this new spark of defiance. Emma, I can hear you talking in there. Marcus called through the door, his voice still maintaining that careful, controlled tone. Just open the door. We can talk about this like adults. Like adults? Emma repeated quietly, shaking her head. He always says that right before he tells me I'm being childish for having feelings. David moved away from the window and positioned himself between Emma and the front door. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do, he said firmly. Emma's phone buzzed again. She glanced at it and her jaw tightened. Now he's saying if I don't come out and talk to him, he's going to assume I've chosen my family over our relationship. She looked up at us. Like that's supposed to be a threat. Isn't it telling? Linda said, settling into the chair across from Emma. That he sees your family supporting you as something to compete with instead of something to respect? The knocking resumed, more aggressive this time. Emma, this is ridiculous. You can't hide in there forever? What are the neighbors going to think? Emma flinched at that. He knows I hate making scenes. He's always used that against me. She stood up abruptly, pacing toward the window. God, I can't even be upset in my own mother's house without him making it about appearances. What do you want to do? I asked, following her. Not what he wants, not what will keep the peace. What do you actually want to do? Emma stared out the window for a long moment. When she turned back to face us, there were tears in her eyes, but her voice was steadier than it had been all evening. I want him to leave. I want to not have to explain myself or justify my feelings. I want to make a decision without being told I'm wrong for making it. Then tell him that, David said. From here, Linda added quickly. You don't have to open the door to set a boundary. Emma walked slowly toward the front door, stopping a few feet away from it. The knocking had paused, but we could hear Marcus moving around on the porch. Marcus! Emma called out, her voice stronger than I'd heard it in months. I need you to leave. Emma, come on, don't be like this. Just open the door, and we can work this out face to face. No, Emma said, and I heard something in that single word that reminded me of the daughter who used to argue with me about curfews and college choices. I said I need you to leave. You're being ridiculous. Your family is poisoning you against me. Can't you see that? Emma looked back at us, and I saw something shift in her expression. The doubt that had been there moments before was hardening into something else. My family is listening to me, she said, turning back toward the door. That's not poisoning. That's support. Emma, if you don't open this door right now, I'm going to assume you've made your choice about us. The silence that followed felt heavy with possibility. Emma stood perfectly still, her hand raised toward the door handle, but not touching it. Maybe I have, she said finally. The footsteps on the porch stopped. When Marcus spoke again, his voice had changed completely. Gone was the reasonable tone, replaced by something cold and sharp. You'll regret this, Emma. You think your family's going to be there for you when you realize what a mistake you're making? You think they actually care about you, or do they just want to control you? Emma's shoulders tensed, but she didn't move toward the door. When you come crawling back, don't expect me to just take you back like nothing happened. David stepped forward. That's enough, he called through the door. She asked you to leave. Time to go. This doesn't involve you, old man. Actually, Emma said, her voice growing stronger, it does involve him. It involves all of them because they're my family and I get to decide who I want in my life. We heard Marcus's footsteps moving across the porch, then his voice one more time, distant now, but still audible. You'll realize what you lost. Don't say I didn't warn you. Emma stayed frozen by the door until we heard his car start and drive away. Then she sank down onto the couch, her whole body shaking. I can't believe I just did that, she whispered. Linda moved to sit beside her. How do you feel? Emma was quiet for a long moment, considering. Terrified, she said finally. But also relieved? Like I can finally breathe properly. I sat down on her other side. That's what standing up for yourself feels like at first. Scary, but right. I keep waiting for him to come back, Emma said, glancing toward the door. Or for my phone to start ringing nonstop. And if it does? David asked gently. Emma looked at her phone, then deliberately turned it face down on the coffee table. Then I'll decide what I'm willing to tolerate, like Mom said. The four of us sat in the quiet for a while, the tension slowly ebbing from the room. Finally, Emma spoke again. Mom, I owe you an apology. Not just for what I said 2 years ago, but for not understanding what you were trying to teach me about standing up for myself. I shook my head. You don't owe me anything. You were right about some of it. I did try to control too much when you were growing up. But maybe now you can see the difference between someone trying to protect you and someone trying to control you. Emma nodded slowly. Marcus always made my decisions feel like they were wrong before I even made them. You used to drive me crazy with your opinions, but you never made me feel stupid for disagreeing with you. That's because disagreeing with me meant you were thinking for yourself, I said. Even when it frustrated me, I was proud of you for having your own thoughts. I lost that somewhere along the way, Emma said quietly. I stopped trusting my own judgment because he was always there to tell me it was wrong. David leaned forward in his chair. The good news is, you can get that back. It's still in there. We saw it tonight. Emma managed a small smile. I'm going to need help remembering how to use it. That's what we're here for, Linda said. Real support doesn't try to make your decisions for you. It just reminds you that you're capable of making them yourself. Emma picked up her phone and looked at the screen. 3 missed calls and 7 text messages, she said. All from him. What do they say? I asked. Emma scrolled through them, her expression growing more disgusted with each one. The usual cycle. First angry, then apologetic, then angry again, then trying to make me feel guilty. She looked up at us. It's like he's following a script. Because he is, in a way, Linda said. People like Marcus use the same patterns over and over because they usually work. Well, they're not working anymore, Emma said, and deleted the messages without responding. I think I need to stay here tonight, if that's okay. I'm not ready to go back to the apartment yet. Of course, I said immediately. You can stay as long as you need. Emma curled up on the couch, looking younger than she had in years. I forgot what it felt like to have people on my side, instead of trying to manage my emotions for me. "We're not going anywhere," David assured her. As the evening wore on, Emma began to talk more freely about her relationship with Marcus, recognizing patterns she hadn't been able to see while she was in the middle of them. Each realization seemed to strengthen her resolve. "You know what the strangest part is?" she said as we were getting ready for bed. "I kept thinking I needed to get stronger to leave him, but it turns out I just needed to remember that I was already strong enough." I hugged her goodnight, feeling like I was embracing the daughter I'd been missing for 2 years. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not saying I told you so." "Thank you," I whispered back, "for trusting us enough to let us help."